Greetings, Mark Grang here, publisher of the Conway Daily Sun, and today my guest is Joe Lentini. Joe, how are you?
I'm quite well.
Good. I think people know you as kind of like a person of many hats. You've been on the school board, which we're going to end up talking about a little bit.
Yes, of course.
But the reason we're chatting today is because of your experience with rescues, and I think everybody knows in town that you're very involved with the Mountain Rescue Service and have been for like 40 years now, right?
More, since 1975.
Okay, so you're still a kid though at heart.
Absolutely.
And are you still doing the rescues?
Of course.
Yeah.
I do as much as I physically can.
Yeah. And how's that, just physically, how's that changed?
The younger folks are faster than me. It's a reality, you know, you deal with, and there are situations I've seen, a couple last year when we needed a small group that were going after people that were missing in a sort of difficult location, and they were going to be transported partway in, and there were a group of younger people faster than me, and I was not going to take a space when one of them would do a better job than I would.
Do you find that it's, you know, because us older guys have, you know, I'm pretty active too. I'm not a rescue guy, but I play sports, and I find it's really the cardio that I notice is getting older, not so much the strength. So is it strength for you or cardio?
No, it's cardio, but it's also the joints. I mean, I've been a climbing guide since 1975.
Right.
I've done somewhere around 500 winter guided ascents of Mount Washington. My joints have been through a lot. Everything works. I have them all, but they can be a little touchy at times.
Yeah, well, I didn't even think about the joints because I play tennis a lot, and every joint in my body will be replaced or has been. Anyway, but what's topical about this is this short film called 109 Below. And probably the most famous rescue was with Albert Dow, who was a rescuer.
Yes.
And died in 1982 in an avalanche. And you've done a lot with it. I mean, you were part of that, and we're going to talk about that. But you did a moth radio hour too, right? With on NPR.
Yep.
Yeah, so you've done a lot. So we're going to play the trailer, Rob. Let's let it go.
New Hampshire's Mount Washington is known for having some of the worst weather in the world. And over the weekend, a hiker died after a daring rescue attempt.
I never went into the mountains expecting help or a rescue. At a certain point, we gave up all attempts to survive.
The rescue system in the state of New Hampshire is kind of this patchwork, and it relies heavily on volunteers.
When the weather is bad, all you have to do is lose your mitten, and you've got a serious problem.
Most people believed that we were dead.
I had been guiding on Mount Washington that day. The radio crackled, and I heard Michael screaming, "Avalanche, avalanche."
After the accident, I took on the view that I was gonna do something positive with my life.
I hated the people who we were searching for because they had cost me my friend.
That was the lowest point of my entire life.
Sometimes you just push that little too far, and you don't know what's too far. You're learning. Hopefully you learn from it.
Anyway, we'll talk about it, Joe. But just to set it up, because you guys were and the guy that you were rescuing was Hugh Herr, right?
Yes.
And he's actually a professor at MIT, or he teaches
Oh,
at MIT?
absolutely. No, the really beautiful part to the story is the fact that he was 17 years old when this happened. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little more later, but he hated school. He just didn't like it, was a terrible student. Went on to get a PhD and a master's, one from MIT, one from Harvard. He is in charge of the development of prosthetic limbs. at MIT. I will tell you a little more when we get to this, but he has done things that are you can't even imagine. He has brought hope to people around the world who have had no hope. He's an amazing man. I consider him a friend.
Yeah. And he was the guy, so he was 17. This is 1982, and Albert Dow was one of your colleagues, rescuers.
Yes.
And the reason why this is famous, outside of just the drama and the story that you just told about Hugh Herr, is that Albert's the only rescuer that's was the first and the only one that's ever died rescuing. Is that true?
In our team, yes.
All right. So, and how did this movie a lot has been written about it, and obviously, how did 109 Below come about? And it's current, so it's not something that was done in the past.
No, it hasn't gone public yet. It's just been at film festivals. Well, I was approached by a woman named Sarah Stewart, who sent me an email saying she was interested, and the company she worked for was interested in doing something about the rescue world and about Mount Washington in winter. So I said, okay, let's talk on the phone. But I get a lot of these and have over the years, you know. So I did my sort of typical Joe and said, so why should I work with you? What have you done? You know, and she goes, well, earlier this year, I won an Academy Award for a short documentary. So I took my foot out of my mouth and said, well, let's talk. She works for a company called Step Studios, which is based out of Southern California. They do mostly commercial work, right, for companies you've probably heard of, like Apple and Microsoft, and their list is endless. But they do their passion pieces, these documentaries they do, the stuff they really love. And so Nick Martini, also the men who started it were three young men who grew up in Plymouth, New Hampshire. Started Step Studios.
Oh, really?
They're probably, I'm guessing they're late 30s right now.
Wow.
Some of them used to ski race on Cannon in the winter. They said nobody in the United States knows what Mount Washington in winter is like. And we want to do something about that and about the rescue world. And that was it. They didn't know where it was going to go yet. But they came up here in February, not last February, the February before, with a crew of 10 for 10 days. And a lot had gone on, you know, over the phone and in various Zoom meetings. And they shot, and they sort of saw where they wanted to go with it. And
but it centered around the Albert Dow rescue.
No, not to begin with. They wanted to see at first what the arc of the movie was going to be. They didn't know what the substance was going to be, but after being up here some and talking, they said that's the direction they wanted to move in.
And how long is the movie?
It's about 14 minutes.
Okay, so, and where is a regular person going to be able to see it?
Well, it premiered late October in New York City with 2 other films that was part of the Arc'teryx No Wasted Days tour. And then it went from there to major cities in the US and Canada, Europe, China, and Japan. And it just finished that up not long ago. And now it's at various film festivals. And I've been told that it's going to be released for public use sometime later this year. But I've shown it a number of times because I was involved with them. I have an actual copy, and I've done talks. I did one at Freedom. I've done one at the high school, one at the high school class. I've done them all over the place.
You know, it's funny about it. It's sort of like everybody knows where they were when, John Lennon was shot or that kind of thing. But then I was here working as a reporter, a photographer, and then I moved away for a few years and came back. But we used to play pickup basketball, John Fuller, and I remember this happening because it was over a couple of days, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so let's go back. Anyway, I just remember talking about it, playing basketball back in 1982. But can we go back to 1982 and kind of go through exactly what happened? Because Hugh was up there for days.
Yes.
Okay,
So what happened is they headed up, Hugh and Jeff Batzer headed up to the Harvard cabin, which is a cabin at the base of Huntington's Ravine that climbers stay at if they're not from the area. And they had a plan to do Odell's Gully, which was one of the ice gullies in Huntington's Ravine. And they had experience. They knew quite a bit. Even though Hugh was 17 years old, he was still a very accomplished climber. But they went up. That would have been on Saturday. On Saturday, just coincidentally, I was guiding 3 people up Mount Washington, and I was on Lion's Head. And there was a storm coming in. I knew there was a storm coming. But even though I knew there was a storm coming, and I was very clear with my clients, we're probably not going to make it to the summit today, because I'm guiding, it's the opportunity to show people what conditions are like. Because people who haven't been there cannot imagine what the conditions are like on Mount Washington in the winter. I mean, so we got up to Lion's Head, which is, a little more than a mile from the top.
Okay, and Lion's Head is, just so people who aren't climbers, if you're looking at Tuckerman Ravine, it's kind of on the right-hand side.
It's on the right-hand side. It's the ridge that goes up. And it's where you then hit the Alpine Garden. So now the wind has a straighter shot at you. Below that point, and when you're in Huntington's, again, you're protected from the wind to a large degree. We got to Lion's Head, and when you step literally over the rocks, and all of a sudden the wind's, 50 miles an hour, 55 miles an hour, hitting you in the face. If you've never felt that, most people would say it's 100. Right. I mean, it is powerful. And so we went back down, and there were no complaints. You take your people, when they take their goggles off and their face masks down, when we got down into the trees, their eyes were like, the size of silver dollars. At the same time, Hugh and Jeff were doing Odell's Gully, and they got to the top, and they decided they wanted to go to the summit. Not unusual, it's a lot more work. What they did is they jettisoned some of their gear down below, some of their emergency gear, their sleeping bags they had left behind. They got up the Huntington Ravine Trail, which then, as it comes up to the auto road, okay, you've been protected from the wind. The wind is blowing from the west-northwest. That's typical on Mount Washington. The wind is blowing over, but just as water in a river, it's creating what's called a lee side rotor, which now curves the wind back in. So they're getting hit in the back by the wind.
Going up.
Going up as they go up the Huntington Ravine Trail to get to the auto road and then up to the summit. They can't tell. I mean, it doesn't look like there's a road there. Plus the visibility is very low. They got up to that point where now they're cresting onto near the road. So now the wind all of a sudden from curving over is now hitting them in the face. So because they couldn't see anything and they decided to turn around, what's logical? If the wind's been hitting me in the back, I go into the wind, and that dropped them off into the Great Gulf.
Oh gosh.
Yes, which then
when you say drop them off, you mean they just, because the Great Gulf is real steep real quickly.
Yeah, but if you're a little bit more to the north side of it, you can hike down there. And they went down into the trees, into the snow, and ultimately, that's where they were for a number of days. Hugh fell in the river at the bottom, and Jeff had some extra clothes to give him. But they realized they weren't getting back out.
Okay,
There was a storm.
What time was this?
That was, well, they got down to the bottom sometime, they think, like 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Okay, okay, go ahead, keep going.
So I take my clients back to the office. I was director of the EMS climbing school then, which I was for 30 years. I take my clients back, we say our goodbyes, go home, get ready, because I know I'm working the next day, and I get a phone call from the Fish and Game. And it's like, we have 2 climbers that are missing, and we're going to need mountain rescue service.
Now this is before GPS world and all that. So they were reported missing by their parents or something?
By the caretaker at the Harvard cabin.
Okay.
Because they were spending the night there, and they haven't come back. So, so back then, when we had just regular phones, so I call usually like 4 people on Mountain Rescue Service, team leaders, and they call 4 or 5 people, so we get the message out. And that's all we know is we meet, we're supposed to meet at Pinkham Notch the next morning, a little before dawn. And hopefully, the people are going to come out in the middle of the night. We don't know, but we head up to Pinkham. A few of us who are team leaders go up and meet with the Fish and Game and sort of come up with a plan.
And this is in the morning?
This is in the morning.
And how's the weather then?
The storm has sort of raged all night, and it's still blowing, and there's a lot of snow in the air. So what we decide is we're going to send one pretty big team up towards the bottom of Huntington's Ravine, not into the ravine because we're concerned about the snow. And they're going to just search down below and just see if there's any tracks, if anybody's trying to come down. And then another group of us, the group I was with, they took us up as far as they could in the auto road, and then we were supposed to now hike up to the Huntington Ravine Trail and then drop down and search the top of the gullies. But we got partway up, and it was just, the wind was very strong, and because of the fresh snow, the visibility kept going down to whiteout conditions. And whiteout is when, if I hold my hand out in front of me, I can't see my hand. And one of our team members, Steve Larson, just took a step back in one spot and just fell down a little hill. Not very far, like 6 feet or something. He was unhurt. But we realized at that point, we're not getting anywhere, and we're going to get hurt. So we went back down. The people in Huntington's went back down. And
when you say, where was Hugh at that point?
They're over in the Great Gulf.
And how far down in the Great Gulf?
They're at the bottom of the Great Gulf.
All right, so that's...
And they've hunkered down underneath some pine boughs because they realize, because the snow's deep too, they're not getting anywhere.
But were they protected at all? I mean, if they're down into the ravine at the bottom.
To some degree,
right,
but right. I believe it went down to 30 below that night.
Hard to get away from that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It was when we were on the road, it was very, very cold. So if you're working really hard, like we were, because you're going, right, working our way up, you have to work really hard to keep your goggles from fogging, because if your goggles ice over, you've got a problem. So, okay, next day, so we go back, work with the Fish and Game. We work very closely with the Fish and Game because we're sort of the technical team. They defer to our judgment, of course. We decided we're going to go out the next morning, and we're going to probably head people up into the ravine, and we're going to search all the gullies.
Okay, now wait a minute. This is day 2?
This is day 2.
Okay, so you went up the first morning, come back.
Yeah.
And now you're the next day.
Yep.
All right, and these guys, you don't know where they are.
We have no idea.
Right.
But, we're thinking, where could they have gone? So we go up. We have 3 teams. There's myself with Tiger Burns, and we were doing South Gully. Albert and Michael Hartrick were doing Odell's Gully, which is the gully that they had said they were going to be climbing. And then I think it was Doug Madeira, and I'm not sure, he might have been with Steve Larson. We're doing Pinnacle Gully. So these are 3 of the main gullies in Huntington's. So we're all climbing. It's cold. It's 30 below at night. It's cold. I went into South Gully with Tiger Burns, and we got up a couple of rope lengths, and we came to a wind slab. Wind slab is when that curling snow, that curling wind, has driven snow, and it almost becomes a structure. It is, it's dangerous because it can build up very thick layers of snow. It can build up layers that are many feet thick. And when it fractures, as opposed to loose snow, fresh snow does a point release. This will, lines will shoot across it, and big sections will go at once.
And heavy.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So we got partway up. I could not get around the wind slab, so we decided that's enough. We're not going any further. We went down. Michael and Albert saw tracks at the top of Odell's because you finish the ice and you still have a little snow slope to get up to the Alpine Gardens. They decided to follow that. Doug and Steve rappelled back down Pinnacle Gully.
When you say rappelled, I mean they were using ropes?
Oh yeah, this is all rope climbing.
All rope climbing?
Oh, this is all rope climbing. These are technical climbs we're on.
Wow.
Yeah, where you're placing ice screws, and yeah, it's all technical ice climbing.
Holy smokes. Okay.
And it's cold.
And how are you finding places to anchor into when the wind's blowing and all that?
Good, you've got the ice, and you have ice screws, which are, 17 to 22 centimeters in length, and they're tubular, and you just screw them into the ice. And if placed properly, they're quite strong.
All right.
Stuff
So, so if you're the lead guy, you put them in first?
Putting them in, I clip a carabiner into it, or a piece of nylon with two carabiners. I clip my rope into it. So as I go up, if I fall, my partner's down below holding the rope. They're anchored into the ice. And if I fall, if I'm 10 feet above the piece of protection, the ice screw, I fall 10 feet to it, I fall 10 feet past it, and then any slack, and then the rope comes tight to my partner, and they stop me.
Falling 10 to 20 feet is no piece of cake, though, even if you're tied in.
If you're on, see, that's the thing. If you're on something steep, it's not like you're rolling down a hill. You're not hitting things as much. So it's reasonable. We do it all the time.
Okay.
In ice climbing, it's a little different. You try not to fall because you have crampons on your feet, you have an ice tool in each hand, and those things are sharp. So in ice climbing, unlike rock climbing, you really try not to fall. You're a little more cautious. So we went down, we all came down, got down to the bottom of the ravine where Brad Ray and Rennie LaRoche, the snow rangers from the Forest Service, are there. We finally decide we're done for the day.
This is day 2.
This is day 2. So.
And Hugh and his partner are still up there underneath the boughs.
Still there, yes. So we get in the snowcat. We're going to go over, and Michael and Albert are going across the Alpine Gardens and then down the Lion's Head Trail, and we're going to meet them down over in Tuckerman's, not in the bowl. It's before you get to the bowl. And I have to say, I was so relieved. We're almost giddy at that point because we're done. It's been 2 long days, and it's been hard. And we're partway over, and the radio sort of crackles, and it's Michael screaming "avalanche, avalanche" into the radio.
Michael Larson?
No, Michael Hartrick,
okay.
Who's Albert's partner. And so Brad Ray sort of puts the throttle down, and off we go down, the road, Snowcat Road, which will hold all of us. There's like 10 of us at this point. Maybe it doesn't. Goes down, over, and then up to Tuckerman's. And as soon as we get to the Winter Lion's Head Trail, we hop out. We send a few people over to a first aid cache to get avalanche probes.
But just so I understand, like when you say you're at the bottom, and we're going to take a break, this is a good spot to take a break because this is where the avalanche is. So, Joe, we're just going to take a break.
Yeah,
and we're
that's
going to
fine.
start up again on the second half of this really fascinating story, and then at the end we're going to talk a little bit about the school board.
Okay.
All right. So hold on a second. Okay.
All set.